Hello and welcome back, I'm Sean, and today we're going to take a look at two of Redmi's latest Note 14 series phone and comparing between the Note 14 5G as well as the Note 14 Pro to see which suits you better. So let's check it out. So let's start out with the similarities of these phones. Camera-wise, you get the same 8-megapixel ultra-wide lens and a 2-megapixel macro lens, and only the main camera and the selfie camera is different on both of these phones, and we'll talk a little bit more about the camera in a later section. And you get the same 45 watts turbo charging on both of these phones, and you also get the 45 watts charging brick itself in the box. So both of these phones have different chipsets, but they run the same LPDDR4X RAM architecture as well as the UFS 2.2 storage, and both can expand storage up to 1TB using microSD card. And both of these phones come with the same size 6.67-inch AMOLED display running the same resolution at 2400 by 1080p, but the display tag itself is quite different, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And also both of these phones supports up to 120Hz screen refresh rate. Specs-wise, both of this phone comes with IP64 dust and water resistant rating, both have Bluetooth 5.3, NFC, in-screen fingerprint, AI face unlock, and both have dual speakers, Dolby Atmos support, and also comes with a 3.5mm headphone jack. So that's all that is the same with both of this phone. So the main difference here with both of this phone is obviously the camera, where you get a 108-megapixel camera on the 14 5G and a 200-megapixel pro-grade camera on the 14 Pro. And the selfie camera is also different, with the 20-megapixel on the 5G model and a 32-megapixel on the Pro model. You also get slightly different chipset on both of these phones, and the Note 14 Pro runs the MediaTek Helio G100 Ultra chip, and the Note 14 5G sports the MediaTek Dimensity 7025 Ultra. Both are pretty good chipset with lots of features to offer on its own respect. Weight-wise is also a little different, where the Pro here is 10 grams lighter than the 5G at 180 grams, and the 5G here comes in at 190 grams. And most obviously, the 5G model supports 5G, and the Pro model here only supports 4G LTE. And battery capacity is also different, where the Pro model has a bigger 5500 mAh battery, where the 5G model has a smaller 5110 mAh battery. So another difference here is the display tag, where the 5G is a 8-bit screen and the Pro comes in at a 10-bit screen, and you do see quite a difference with the screen color rendition. And finally, the biggest difference here is that the 5G model comes with a flat screen and the Pro model comes with a curved screen. So what I like about these phones is the camera, and especially with the Redmi Note 14 Pro model, you get a good 200-megapixel camera, but most importantly is the camera sensor is also larger at 1/1.14 inch versus a smaller 1/1.67 inch on the 5G model. So to give you some context, this is almost as big as the sensor you get with the DJI Osmo Action 5 action camera here. That is actually a very good sensor size. I also love the battery life you get with both of these phones. The Pro is definitely better, and we'll look into the detailed battery test shortly. And I like both of these phones comes with Corning Gorilla Glass technology, although it's different in spec, but still great to see good glass technology on both of these phones, and we'll talk a little bit about display shortly as well. So the first area I think could be better. Granted, I understand that these things are chipset dependent, but it's for these mid-range phones to have better video support. Both of these phones supports video recording up to 1080p only, where the 5G goes up to 30 frames per second and the Pro goes up to 60 frames per second, but both of these phone films 720p at only 30 frames per second. And I really think that although these phones are marketed with AI features, I really think they are more of a novelty than real practical use cases. And I think features like the AI Erase and AI Erase Pro on the 5G and Pro respectively does only an okay job, but nothing mind-blowing. And I understand that most of these phones have an emphasis more on the main camera, but it would be good to see also an improvement on their ultra-wide and macro camera, because those are the cameras that usually take a hit in quality, especially in low light. So if you want to find out the latest price for both of these phones, do check out my links in the description for their latest pricing. And if you find value in what you hear and like what you see so far, do subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so the YouTube algorithm can pick this up. And if you want to buy any of these phones, do check out my links below. So let's talk about the display technology of both of these phones. And I think both of these phones have good displays. They come with a large 6.67-inch AMOLED display with deep dark blacks and have a good resolution, as I've mentioned, 2400 by 1080p, which are full HD displays. However, there are a few key differences. So from a general standpoint, looking at both of these screens, the 5G model that we have over here has kind of some rainbow effects as if I look at it when tilting the phone around, looking at different angles, where the Pro model has a more consistent, stable screen. And with the 5G model, you're also getting a very good 2100 nits peak brightness, where the Pro model supports only 1800 nits peak brightness. This is mostly noticeable when you're playing HDR content, and you really can see the difference in brightness with the two models. And on the flip side, the Pro model comes with a 10-bit color display versus a 8-bit on the 5G model, meaning you get a deeper, wider range of color with the Pro, and viewing content that is shot in 10-bit using, for example, the Osmo Action 5 Pro, you can clearly see the differences between the vibrancy and color dynamics range between these two phones. Both of these phones runs DCI-P3 wide color gamut, so they are both very accurate color displays. However, from a screen perspective, the 5G model has kind of a warmer screen, so things kind of appear slightly more yellowish, where the Pro model has a cooler screen, so things appear more blue. And finally, the 5G model uses Corning Gorilla Glass 5, where the Pro model comes with a better Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2. In terms of battery life, both phones shows consistent draining throughout our YouTube video test. Running at full resolution and full brightness, both of these phones drain consistently according to their battery capacity. So starting with the 5G model that comes with a 5110 mAh battery, whereas the Pro model here comes with a 5500 mAh battery. In our YouTube test for both of these phones, in the first hour, the 5G went down to 94% and the Pro went down to 95%, showing a stronger hold in battery with the larger capacity. And by the 5-hour mark, it's more obvious where the 5G went down to 63% battery and the Pro at 67%. So moving towards the 10-hour mark, the 5G went down to 22%, where the Pro remains at a strong 29% battery life. And the 5G lasted for 11 hours and 30 minutes before it died, and the Pro went on to 12 hours and 15 minutes before dying out. So both of these phones comes with a good 45 watts fast charging, and Redmi also provides you with a charging brick in the box itself, which is very thoughtful. So both of these phones runs mid-spec chipsets, where the 5G runs the Dimensity 7025 Ultra chipset and the Pro runs the Helio G100 Ultra chipset. Both are octa-core chipsets, with the former running a clock speed up to 2.5 GHz and the latter running a clock speed up to 2.2 GHz. So with both of these chipsets, there are no 4K or 2160 playback when watching any videos, be it YouTube or anywhere else. And in the YouTube app, you see it goes upwards of only 1440p. And problem here is that although the Pro chipset also supports HDR content, in YouTube you only see HDR indication in the 5G model, where the Pro model doesn't show the HDR. Gaming on intense game like PUBG works great on this phone, and I think it plays fast and smooth on both of these phones. I don't feel any significant difference between the smoothness of both of these phones. Running at HD graphics at high frame rate, there isn't really any noticeable lagging on both. However, although the phone comes with a 120Hz display, gameplay here feels more like 30 frames per second on both phones, even on the Pro model. And the 5G model comes with 3 specs, so 6GB with 128GB of storage, 8GB RAM with 256GB storage, as well as 12GB RAM with 512GB of storage. The Pro model starts at 8GB of RAM with either 128 or 256GB of storage, and also 12GB RAM with either 256 or 512GB of storage. And both of these phones support up to 1TB of expandable storage using microSD. So in terms of camera, both of these phones has very good cameras for mid-range phone, but they have their differences. And if you want cleaner, better quality photos, I would recommend the Redmi Note 14 Pro, mainly for its pro-grade camera with a larger sensor. Whether it's 108 megapixel or 200 megapixel, unless you really go and pixel peep, you won't see much of a difference from a resolution standpoint. All you get with a larger megapixel camera is bigger file size, where a typical photo from the Pro's 200 megapixel lens is around 40 to 50 megabytes, and the 108 megapixel 5G model is around 20 to 30 megabytes. Just by looking at some high contrast shots, you can immediately see the quality difference in the sensor, where the Pro has less visible chromatic aberration, which is that rich fringing around that tree leaves area that you can see here. And apart from that, most shots are pretty clean, with the 200 megapixel giving you slightly more resolution when zoomed in. So images from the 200 megapixel lens is also a lot sharper in the middle as well as the far corners of the shot. Very impressive. Also in the same scenarios, the Pro model gets better dynamic range as well as noise performance, as you can see in this shot right over here, where the Pro model used a cleaner, brighter and less grainy shot. So both phones get a 0.6x 8 megapixel ultra wide lens, and it's usually one of my favorite lenses to shoot on a phone. And with both cameras here, you're getting identical performance. It's got a decent f2.2 aperture, meaning it'll try to use less ISO to compensate for darker scenes. But if you ask me whether it's a really sharp lens, I would say no. Both phones shows quite a soft result with very little details and resolution, but it is typical to most ultra-wide lens in the mid-range phone category. Moving on to macro shots, and although both phones sports a 2 megapixel f2.4 macro lens, the output from the Note 14 Pro is much better. As you can see from some of the detailed shots you can get with the phone. In most scenarios, I think the 5G model does come with a more overly sharpened look, where the Pro comes with a softer, more pleasing look. So with the front camera, the Pro gets a larger 32 megapixel f2.2 lens, and the 5G gets a 20 megapixel f2.2 lens. And in real world practice, you do see a smoother and sharper shot with the Pro model again, and with that softer Pro look compared to the overly sharpened look of the 5G. And in terms of video recording capabilities, both phones shoots up to 1080p, but the Pro lets you shoot up to 60 frames per second only in 1080p. So both phones only shoot in 30 frames per second in 720p. Really not the best video performance in my opinion, but I understand that this is all dependent on chipset that the phone company uses, but it's really sad if you rely on your phone to capture video moments. So although both phones comes with dual speaker setup and Dolby Atmos support, I think both phones sounds mediocre at best, and this is typical to most phones, especially with smaller speakers. So the 5G model is the louder of the two, and volume peaks at around 96 decibels from my test, where the Pro model gets a peak volume around 90 decibels. But you're not missing out too much from the volume here, since both of these phones are not very dynamic sounding. They start to crack and sound overly sharp and bright when it gets to the louder volumes, and when played at decent volume levels, somewhere around 30 to 50% range, they both sound decently good. Overall, two very capable mid-range devices with very promising main cameras and specs overall. Performance is strong and up to date, and both comes with great displays. Some features I would love to see is better chipset on these devices so that they can support higher resolutions, video recording of up to 4K, as well as 4K HDR playback on these mid-range phones will be perfect. So if you want to take a look at some of the other phone reviews that I've done, you can click on this playlist right over here to better understand which phone might interest you best, and I'll see you over at those videos.